Daniel Brooks had never had a run-in with authority, at least, not the kind that involved neighborhood drama. After retiring from the fire department at 55, he and his wife Lena decided to move somewhere quiet, somewhere they could finally breathe without sirens and chaos. Maple Ridge seemed perfect: clean streets, trimmed hedges, and a gated community where everything looked like a real estate catalog. But beneath the surface of that perfect stillness lurked something he didn't see coming. Karen Albridge. Karen wasn't elected HOA president so much as she seized the role. The previous president stepped down after a health scare, and Karen was the only one who volunteered. From that moment on, she turned Maple Ridge into her personal fiefdom. Some called her organized. Others, mostly behind closed doors, called her obsessive. To Karen, every inch of the community was her responsibility. She walked the sidewalks like a beat cop, clipboard in hand, sunglasses perched halfway down her nose. She memorized code numbers, cited policy like scripture, and had the board meetings recorded for transparency. And when new homeowners moved in, she introduced herself before the welcome committee could. Daniel met her 2 days after moving in. She appeared in the driveway with a file folder and a tight-lipped smile. "Mr. Brooks, I just wanted to say welcome. And to review a few neighborhood expectations so you're off on the right foot." It wasn't a conversation. It was a warning dressed as a greeting. Daniel had nodded politely, thanked her, and tucked the papers in a drawer. He had no plans to cause trouble, but trouble didn't need an invitation. It only needed an excuse. The first violation notice arrived a month later. Lawn height exceeded the community standard by 0.75 inches. A week after that came another 4 inconsistent mailbox color. Then came a formal written warning over the trash bins being visible from the street. Lena tried to keep things calm. "Just let it go, Dan. She's trying to assert control. That's all. Don't give her the satisfaction." He followed the rules, stayed quiet, and minded his business. Until the locks changed. That part had nothing to do with Karen. Daniel had noticed signs of tampering on his front door, tiny scratches near the deadbolt, like someone had tried to pick it. Marcus, his son, suggested it could have been a bored teenager or even an old key from a previous owner. Daniel didn't think much of it. He just replaced the locks and upgraded the security plate. What he didn't know was that Karen still had what she called the community master key, an old copy that used to work on several homes back when the HOA had a shared emergency entry policy. The policy had been voted out years ago, but Karen kept her copy anyway, just in case. On a rainy Tuesday morning, Karen marched up to Daniel's porch with a clipboard, gloves, and her old key. She slipped it into the lock with the confidence of someone who expected results. It didn't turn. She pulled it out, glanced at it, and tried again. Nothing. Rain misted her glasses as she knocked sharply. No answer. Frustrated, she turned the knob and pushed. Still locked. Karen's nostrils flared. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911. "What's your emergency?" Her voice, tight and self-important, said, "This is Karen Albridge, HOA president of Maple Ridge. I attempted to enter one of our HOA managed properties for an inspection and the lock's been changed without board approval. I'm concerned there's a safety issue or worse. I need officers dispatched immediately." She gave Daniel's address. On the other end of the line, the dispatcher stared at the screen. His fingers hovered over the keyboard. Slowly, he clicked through the caller's report, then cross-referenced the location. He rubbed his jaw, because the house she just tried to enter. It belonged to his father, and his shift had just begun. Marcus Brooks leaned back in his chair at the dispatch center, the low hum of radios filling the quiet space. It was early, and most of the city still slept. He sipped his black coffee, eyes drifting toward the incoming call log flashing red on his screen. Caller Karen Albridge, incident, attempted entry/suspicious circumstances, location, 134 Ridge Pine Lane. Marcus's hand froze around the mug. He knew that address, knew it better than any in the system. That was his parents' house. He plugged in his headset. 911. "What's your emergency?" Karen's voice came through crisp and confident, like she'd practiced the story in her car. "Yes, I'm calling as the HOA president for Maple Ridge. I attempted to enter one of our community properties this morning for a board inspection, and the lock was changed without notice. That's a safety violation, and I'm concerned there's something more serious going on inside." Marcus tapped a few keys, logging the report as she spoke. "Ma'am," he said, calm, but firm. You tried to enter someone's private residence. It's not just any residence. It's under HOA jurisdiction, and I have a key that's always worked before. Something's changed. And the homeowner is aware of this inspection. Karen hesitated. Look, I don't need to explain our internal policies. I need officers dispatched to the scene. Marcus's brow furrowed. She didn't know who she was talking to. Ma'am, for clarity, you're reporting that you tried to enter a locked home without permission and the door wouldn't open. Karen's tone sharpened. I'm not just anybody. I represent the HOA. We have authority. No, ma'am, you do not have legal authority to enter private property without the owner's consent, Marcus said, his voice even but unshakable. The master key program you're referencing was discontinued. That's not a valid basis for forced entry. I'm not forcing anything, she snapped. I was ensuring compliance. We have policies. Those policies don't override state law. Silence stretched on the line. Then she added, quieter now. Well, I'd like to speak to your supervisor. Marcus took a slow breath. I'm the shift supervisor tonight. Excuse me, I'm also the son of the homeowner you just tried to report. Another beat of silence. You what? You called 911 on my father? Ma'am, for not letting you into his house. A long pause. Karen's voice was smaller when she spoke again. I didn't know. This is highly irregular. A conflict of interest. You're entitled to file a report with your local precinct, ma'am, Marcus replied, but if you attempt to enter that property again without consent, you may be facing a trespassing complaint of your own. Karen didn't answer. Anything else I can help you with this morning? Marcus added, leaning back slowly in his chair. The line went dead. He sat still for a moment, processing the absurdity of it all. Then he stood and walked over to the break room, phone in hand. He typed out a quick text to his dad. Dad, Karen just tried to call the cops on you. I took the call. The reply came 3 dots, then, that woman's lost her damn mind. 20 minutes later, Karen stood on the sidewalk outside Daniel's house, arms crossed tightly over her clipboard. Rain speckled her coat and her hair clung to her forehead. Her cheeks were flushed, not from cold but from embarrassment. Daniel finally opened the door, calm/unbothered. Can I help you? He asked. I was concerned. You didn't file an entry notice for your lock change, she said stiffly. I wasn't aware I needed to, Daniel replied, holding up a copy of the HOA rulebook. Section 1 foresee homeowners have the right to change locks without HOA approval, as long as the exterior appearance remains compliant. It's right here. Karen stared at the book like she'd never seen it before. Daniel gave a patient smile. You tried to use a key that shouldn't exist anymore. That's the real problem here. Karen's mouth opened, then shut. I think we're done here, Daniel said, and gently closed the door. From inside, Lena peeked through the curtain. Was that who I think it was? Daniel exhaled. Yep, and Marcus handled it better than I ever could. Daniel Brooks had thought the situation was over. After Karen's failed 911 stunt and her quick retreat off his front porch, he hoped that embarrassment would be enough to cool her jets. Maybe, he told himself, she'd finally realize she crossed a line. That even her obsessive rulebook crusade had limits. But Karen didn't back down. She regrouped, and the next strike came in the form of a thick manila envelope shoved into Daniel's mailbox 3 days later. Inside was an official violation notice from the Maple Ridge HOA, printed on glossy letterhead and signed in looping ink at the bottom. Karen Alpridge, HOA President. Neil stood in his kitchen, jaw clenched, eyes scanning. The document, Lena read over his shoulder, her hand resting on his back as she murmured the words aloud. Section 9A. Unauthorized modifications to exterior security features. Obstruction of emergency access. Failure to notify HOA Board of changes impacting community safety. Daniel scoffed. She's calling the new lock a security risk. Keep going, Lena said, frowning. Failure to comply will result in a $650 fine. Daniel lowered the paper. He wasn't angry in the explosive way he might have been 10 years ago. Not the kind of rage that makes a man yell or pound on a desk. No, this anger simmered. Quiet, controlled, and far more dangerous. She's trying to cover her tracks, he said. Make it look like I'm the one in violation so her little key stunt seems justified. Lena nodded. She's hoping you'll pay the fine quietly so it ends on her terms. I'm not paying anything, Daniel said, already reaching for his phone. That evening, he filed a formal complaint with the city police outlining Karen's attempted unlawful entry and citing his home security footage as evidence. He didn't intend to press charges yet, but the paper trail needed to exist. Then he made copies of everything: the violation notice, the HOA rules, the footage stills, and slid them into a binder. Daniel Brooks might have been retired, but 22 years in the fire department taught him how to document a problem and build a case. The next HOA board meeting was only 4 days away, and he planned to be there. The room smelled like burnt coffee and fresh toner. Folding chairs creaked under the weight of annoyed residents as Karen stood at the front of the community center, framed by a projector screen showing pie charts no one had asked for. Daniel sat halfway down the row, calm as a stone. Lena was beside him, silent and sharp, and in the back of the room, off-duty and leaning against the wall in plain clothes, stood Marcus, arms folded, expression unreadable. And so, Karen was saying, it's important we uphold our standards of safety and uniformity across the neighborhood. That includes consistent security measures that ensure board accessibility in the event of a home emergency. She clicked her remote, and a slide popped up with bullet points, locks, codes, entry procedures. Daniel raised his hand. Karen hesitated. Mr. Brooks, quick question, he said, voice steady. Is there anywhere in the current HOA charter that requires homeowners to maintain lock access for board members? Karen blinked. Well, not explicitly, but that would be a no, he cut in, because that policy was repealed 5 years ago. Page 12, under Addendum 4. The Master Key program was ended after the last security audit. I've got a printed copy if anyone wants it. He held up the document, pages neatly clipped. Karen's smile twitched. Daniel continued. So when the HOA president tried to use an expired key to open my door without notice or consent, it wasn't just improper, it was illegal. I've filed a report with the local police. Murmurs spread through the room like smoke. And now, Daniel said, holding up the violation notice, I'm being fined for a lock change that's fully compliant with Section 14C of the same charter. Karen's face was flushing red. I have no issue with the HOA, Daniel added, looking around the room. But I have a serious issue when the rules are twisted to protect someone who overstepped their authority. The silence was weighty. Then a woman near the front, soft-spoken, middle-aged, her hand. I got fined for a non-beige mailbox last year, she said. Karen told me it was urgent, but I checked. The color I used is on the approved palette. Another man added, she gave me a citation for a basketball hoop in my driveway. Said it was a safety hazard. I had to take it down. A third woman chimed in. She threatened to report my son's car for being parked too long, and he was home for Christmas break. Daniel didn't speak. He didn't need to. The fire had already caught. 2 days after the HOA meeting exploded into murmurs and second thoughts, Daniel Brooks found himself wide awake at 5:13 a.m., coffee in hand, staring out the living room window. Lena slept upstairs. Marcus was at the tail end of a night shift, but Daniel's mind wouldn't rest, not after the way Karen had glared at him as she packed up her slideshow and bolted from the meeting room. It wasn't over. He knew that look. Karen wasn't backing down, she was regrouping, and that's exactly why Daniel had quietly installed the Ring doorbell camera the day after the incident. Not just the standard model, either. This one had a wide-angled lens and motion-triggered alerts linked directly to his phone. He'd also installed a discrete sensor above the garage and 2 more on the side of the house. Karen had violated his trust. She'd stepped over a line. Now he wanted eyes on every corner of it. And just 3 days later, at exactly 6:41 a.m., Daniel got the proof he didn't even realize he needed. His phone buzzed with a motion alert. He tapped the notification, and the live video opened up, grainy in the dawn light, but unmistakable. Karen Albridge, clipboard in hand, measuring tape dangling from her wrist, she crept up the walkway. Lips tight, posture stiff, as if she were approaching a crime scene. Her heels clicked softly against the bricks as she paused at the base of Daniel's steps and began scribbling on a legal pad. Then, without warning, she stepped off the path and began circling the house perimeter, inspecting the gutters, the side yard, even crouching to examine the gravel near the driveway. Daniel watched from the window, half in disbelief, half in fury. She hadn't sent an email. No inspection notice. No board approval. She was operating under the same fantasy she always did. that the rules were hers to interpret, that she wasn't accountable to the same limits everyone else lived under, and then, just when he thought it couldn't get more absurd, Karen stopped, pulled out her phone, and whispered into it. Daniel couldn't hear the call, but he caught the expression, her lips curling into a smirk as she said something that made her nod to herself. Satisfied, he hit the record button on the app and saved the footage. Later that day, Daniel uploaded the clip to the Maple Ridge Community Forum, with a simple caption, "This is what an unannounced HOA inspection looks like. For anyone who's ever gotten a surprise citation, you might want to check your footage too." He didn't add commentary. He didn't need to. By nightfall, the forum had over 70 comments and dozens of shares. Some were shocked, some were angry, but more than anything, they were familiar. A man named Greg from Lot 7 posted a photo of his teenage son's mini basketball hoop disassembled in a trash bin. Karen called it an eyesore and said it encouraged loitering. "We didn't even live here 2 months." Mrs. Delgado from Lot 14 uploaded a screenshot of an HOA. Notice she'd received a time-stamped 9/12 p.m, claiming her holiday string lights were too excessive for community taste. And then came the final blow. A resident named Trish uploaded her ring footage. It showed Karen, a month prior, walking up to her porch at dusk with a clipboard and snapping photos of her window flower boxes, while muttering to herself, "These people think this is their neighborhood." The mood shifted. People weren't just annoyed anymore. They were furious. The following evening, Daniel got a knock on his door, not from Karen, but from 2 neighbors he barely knew, Kevin from Lot 5 and Rhea from Lot 12. "We've been talking," Kevin said. "We think it's time for a special vote." "A no-confidence vote," Rhea added, "to remove her from the board." Daniel was quiet for a moment. "You sure people are ready for that?" Kevin laughed, holding up his phone. "There's already a spreadsheet. We're just asking if we can list you as a witness to your incident, and maybe speak on it." Daniel glanced back toward his house. Lena stood by the door, watching. She gave him a slow, supportive nod. He looked back at Kevin and Rhea. "Yeah," Daniel said. "It's time." The night of the special HOA meeting, the air inside the community center was thick with tension. Chairs scraped, murmurs echoed, and the flicker of fluorescent lights cast shadows over faces that once nodded politely in passing, but now looked wary, determined. Daniel Brooks sat near the front, calm but alert. His wife Lena held his hand tightly, a small gesture of solidarity. Behind them, neighbors filled the room, many clutching folders, printouts, or smartphones, ready to present evidence against the HOA president Karen Albridge. The mayor had been invited to observe but kept a quiet distance. This was, after all, a homeowners association affair. Karen entered with the confidence of a seasoned politician. Clipboard in hand, eyes scanning the room like a commander surveying her troops. She stepped up to the podium and adjusted the microphone. "Thank you all for coming," she began smoothly. "I understand there are concerns about my leadership. I want to assure you that everything I have done has been in the best interest of Maple Ridge and its residents." A ripple of polite coughs met her words. Daniel stood. "Excuse me," he said, voice steady but firm. "I don't doubt your intentions, Karen, but actions matter more than words." The room grew silent. He clicked a button on his tablet, and the projector illuminated the front wall with a paused video frame. Karen creeping up his driveway, clipboard in hand, tape measure dangling. This footage was captured without warning or consent. Daniel continued. "It shows an unannounced inspection contrary to HOA guidelines that require notice 48 hours prior." Karen's smile faltered. "I'm here to tell you, this isn't isolated," Daniel said, flipping to the next slide. The faces in the crowd brightened as others stepped forward. Mrs. Delgado, clutching a printed email, addressed the room. "I received a citation for my mailbox color," she said. "After paying a fine, I checked the approved color list. Mine was right there." Greg, a burly man with a worn baseball cap, stepped up next. "My kid's basketball hoop was declared a safety hazard. Karen demanded it be removed, or I'd face penalties. There's no clause about hoops in the bylaws." One by one, homeowners recounted stories of Karen's strict enforcement, arbitrary fines, and the toxic atmosphere she cultivated. Marcus Brooks, normally reserved, approached the microphone. "I'm not here to escalate tensions," he said, voice steady, "but watching my father endure this harassment while trying to be a good neighbor has been hard. It's time for leadership that listens, not intimidates." Karen's eyes flickered with frustration. She raised her voice. I am the elected president. I am responsible for enforcing our rules. A man from the back shouted, "You're abusing your power." Whispers spread across the room. The meeting grew heated, but calm moderators stepped in to maintain order. When the floor opened to votes, the atmosphere was palpable. Karen's name was put to a vote of no confidence. The tally was swift and decisive. 5-2-0. Karen sat frozen, lips pressed tightly as the room erupted into relieved murmurs. Outside, as the crowd dispersed into the warm evening air, Daniel felt a weight lift from his shoulders. Neighbors who had barely spoken before now exchanged nods and smiles. Kevin from Lot 5 approached, clapping Daniel on the back. "This is the beginning of something better," he said. Lena smiled at her husband. "You did this." Daniel shook his head. "We did this." Marcus pulled him aside. "Wait until you see what's next." Back at home, Daniel reviewed the next set of HOA bylaws, looking for anything Karen might have used to defend herself. He paused on an obscure clause, labeled grandfathered property rights. His eyes narrowed. Lena appeared behind him. "What is it?" Daniel pointed to the paper. "This might be the key to understanding what's really going on." After the decisive no-confidence vote, a strange quiet settled over Maple Ridge, but Daniel Brooks knew better than to trust silence, especially when Karen Albridge was involved. Within days, Karen sent letters to multiple homeowners, including Daniel, through her newly retained private attorney. The letters were firm, laced with legal jargon, and heavy with warnings, cease and desist accusations of defamation, threats of lawsuits, and demands to remove all social media posts referencing the HOA president's conduct. Daniel read the letter carefully, his lips tightened. "Looks like she's not going down without a fight," Lena said, peering over his shoulder. Daniel nodded. "She's trying to intimidate us with legal threats, hoping we'll back off." But Daniel wasn't about to let fear rule the day. He reached out to an old friend, Carla, a real estate attorney who specialized in HOA law. Over coffee at a local cafe, Carla flipped through Daniel's binder. First, she said, the master key policy Karen mentioned was officially revoked in 2019. She holding on to her key is technically unauthorized possession. Daniel's brow furrowed. Double quotes next. "This letter about your lock change. The bylaws you showed me explicitly say homeowners can upgrade or change locks without HOA approval, as long as exterior aesthetics remain consistent. And the threats. Mostly bluff. Suing an entire neighborhood over social media comments isn't realistic, and the HOA board voted her out, so she no longer represents the community." Daniel felt a surge of relief. "So we're solid." Carla smiled. "Legally, yes, but Karen's trying to draw lines in the sand, testing who will stand firm." That night, Daniel called Marcus. "Son, you still working nights?" "Yeah, why can you keep an ear out? If Karen tries calling 911 again, I want to be ready." Marcus chuckled. "Got it, Dad. I've got your back." Meanwhile, Karen wasn't finished. She convened a private meeting with a small faction of loyal homeowners, pitching a campaign to reinstate community-wide security protocols, including reintroducing the master key policy this time, under stricter enforcement. But the backlash was swift. Most residents had had enough of Karen's overreach. An anonymous petition circulated, demanding a community vote to repeal any attempt to bring back the master key program. In response, Karen publicly denounced the petition, calling it a smear campaign orchestrated by those opposing safety and order. Back at Daniel's house, he noticed a flurry of activity on the neighborhood forum. Threads about privacy, homeowner rights, and security cameras dominated conversations. One post stood out. Karen had petitioned to ban personal surveillance devices like Ring cameras, claiming they infringed on board members' privacy during inspections. Daniel stared at the post. "We need to fight this too," Lena said firmly. Daniel agreed. He prepared a community newsletter, outlining homeowner rights to privacy and recording device, citing legal precedents. He arranged a meeting with other tech-savvy residents to discuss a collective approach. Weeks passed. The tension between Karen and the community grew, but so did a sense of unity among homeowners. Daniel, Marcus and a core group organized educational sessions on HOA bylaws, legal rights, and neighborly communication. They invited Carla to speak at the next community meeting. The once neighborhood began to heal not by erasing conflict, but by confronting it head-on. One evening, Daniel reviewed the HOA's archive of governing documents. His eyes landed on a page titled, grandfathered property rights. Underneath, in small print, was a clause preserving certain rights for properties renovated before a specific cutoff date. Curious. Daniel flipped through his home improvement receipts. His back deck had been refinished 2 months before that cutoff. Could this clause protect him from Karen's complaints about unauthorized exterior modifications? He grabbed the phone. "Lena," he said. "We might have something here." The tension in Maple Ridge had reached a boiling point, but Daniel Brooks still had one card left to play. That obscure clause buried in the HOA charter, the one about grandfathered property rights, had been gathering dust for years. Forgotten by most, but not by him. The clause stated, in no uncertain terms, that any exterior modifications made before a certain cutoff date were exempt from new restrictive rules. Daniel's back deck renovation had been completed 2 months before that date. As he sifted through his carefully organized stack of receipts, permits, and dated photographs, a slow smile spread across his face. "Lena," he said, calling his wife into the study, "look at this. The dates prove that my deck is grandfathered in. It's fully legal." Lena examined the documents with a raised eyebrow. "So, Karen's complaints about your unauthorized modifications won't hold water." "Exactly, and that's not all." Daniel flipped through an old HOA board meeting transcript from 5 years ago. His finger traced a signature at the bottom of the page. It was Karen's. She had signed off on the very clause now protecting his property. Daniel leaned back, the irony not lost on him. The next HOA meeting was charged with an electric energy. Word had spread about Daniel's discovery, and the community was hungry for answers. Karen arrived with her usual air of certainty, but the room greeted her with murmurs of doubt. When Daniel stood and addressed the board, all eyes turned to him. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began. "I'd like to present something that may clarify the confusion surrounding my property and the accusations against me." He held up the documents. "This clause here exempts modifications made before a specific cutoff date which my deck renovation falls under." He paused and looked toward Karen. Even more, the clause was ratified with Karen's signature. As a board member, this means that the foundation of her complaints has been invalidated by her own approval. A hush fell over the room. Karen's face tightened, her usual composure cracking. I wasn't aware of this," she stammered. "Policies evolve. People make mistakes." A homeowner from the crowd called out, "You're saying you enforced rules you helped cancel." Karen said nothing. With the community's support, the board moved swiftly to dismiss Karen's pending fines against Daniel and others. A motion was put forth to officially nullify any enforcement actions taken by Karen during her tenure that conflicted with the grandfather clause. The vote was unanimous, as Karen sat in stunned silence. Her influence dwindled visibly, but the biggest shock came after the meeting. Daniel received an unexpected phone call. It was Karen's attorney. "Mr. Brooks," the voice said, "Ms. Albridge wishes to propose a private settlement to avoid further conflict." Daniel exchanged a look with Lena. "We're listening." The attorney continued, "Ms. Albridge admits that some of her actions were overzealous, but she wishes to ensure a peaceful resolution. She proposes stepping down fully from any HOA involvement and withdrawing all pending legal threats, in exchange for confidentiality." Daniel thought for a moment. "Tell her we'll consider it, but only if it benefits the community as a whole, not just her." Word spread quickly. Karen would finally be stepping down. The community exhaled. For the first time in months, the mood shifted from confrontation to cautious optimism. Neighbors reached out, sharing stories of how the ordeal had forced them to unite. Marcus smiled as he sat with his father on the refurbished deck, the late afternoon sun casting golden light over the neighborhood. "You really never told her you were the dispatcher that day," Daniel teased. Marcus laughed, shaking his head. "Some things are better left as surprises." The news spread through Maple Ridge like wildfire. Karen Albridge was officially stepping down from all HOA roles. After months of confrontation, accusations, and heated meetings, the neighborhood was finally ready to close the chapter on what many had come to call the Karen era. Daniel Brooks sat quietly in the community center as the new board gathered to welcome fresh faces and reset the tone. He didn't crave the spotlight. His role was simple now: to be a steady presence and a voice of reason. Lena squeezed his hand gently. "You've done more than your part." He smiled but felt the weight of every argument, every late-night phone call, every tense exchange. The fight had been exhausting, but it had been worth it. The final HOA meeting with Karen present was a surreal moment. She walked in with her usual poise, though there was a noticeable lack of the swagger that once filled the room. As the meeting progressed, Karen's motions and proposals were met with polite but firm resistance. When it came time to officially accept her resignation, she rose slowly, the room silent. Approaching Daniel in the hallway afterward, Karen's voice was low, almost vulnerable. "You think you won," she said, barely above a whisper. Daniel met her gaze calmly. "No," he said, "I think we all did." Karen nodded once, then turned away. Back at home, the Brooks family gathered on the refurbished back deck. Marcus cracked open two beers and handed one to his dad. "You really never told her you were the dispatcher that day," Daniel said with a chuckle. Marcus smiled, figured it was better that way. "Some surprises are worth keeping." Lena joined them, leaning against the railing. "It's peaceful again," she said. "Feels like we can finally breathe." Daniel looked around at his home, the house that had weathered more storms than the neighbors knew. He thought about the journey. From polite warnings to legal letters, from secret cameras to community votes. And through it all, the one thing that never changed was the neighborhood itself, the people who lived there, quietly hoping for peace, respect, and fairness. Maple Ridge wasn't perfect. There would always be rules, disagreements, and moments of tension. But now, the community had learned something more important. That true leadership isn't about wielding power, it's about serving the people with honesty, humility, and respect. Daniel raised his beer toward the twilight sky. To new beginnings, Marcus and Lena raised theirs in unison. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, Maple Ridge settled into a calm it hadn't known in months. End of story.